This is the first 2023 edition of NOAA Digital Video Series. Today we have a visitor from our last conference, a very unique portfolio approach, investments in sustainability firms. And if you look at their current backers, it's quite impressive German who's who family office lineup, and they're institutionalizing and increasing the size of their fund. Jobst and I had the opportunity to talk already for an hour about the opportunities on the market, the portfolio, and his partner Michael has joined us today for the NOAA Digital Call. Yeah, maybe we start with a quick introduction. Jobst, how did you end up to run econnext?
Right, Marco, many thanks for giving us that opportunity. Look, Michael and I spent a couple of years at Deutsche Bank. Michael worked in the asset management and project finance space primarily. I did corporate finance, and we both are basically high conviction animals with respect to sustainability and climate. And in 2015, we stepped out of Deutsche Bank with a plan to build a pure play focused on climate, decarbonization, circular economy. And that is unique. You know, we are not a fund, we are a holding company. We are a management holding company, and we hold significant stakes in 7 highly attractive climate tech companies, and all of them are ready to scale now. Examples are solar roof tiles, utility scale energy storage solutions, green energy as a service, PV recycling, circular economy, biochar production, bidirectional wallbox technology, and SDG and sustainability screening. So all of them very much focused on climate, but we play it as a holding company, so very much involved with our companies.
Interesting. At what stage you usually invest?
When we got into these situations, we looked normally that there need to be a credible client that has already committed and shown interest with respect to the product. And that was actually then the reason when we, or the trigger point when we stepped in. Those were early stage situations. Right now, they are in a scale up situation. And we would not look at any sort of new additions which are completely distinct, but we would only consider highly synergetic situations. So we took a stake in an EV charging technology end of last year, but we want to focus on the realization of the huge potential in the existing portfolio and in the existing in current activities. That is our focus.
Does this mean that the funds you're raising currently are going into existing portfolio mostly, or also? Okay.
That is the plan.
Okay, and what is your ownership? And I guess you also follow in rounds coming thereafter. It sounds like you're coming after revenue model or business model is proven, and you start then with a small minority, and then what's your average ownership in your 7 portfolio companies?
Yeah, we have 7 participations, and indeed in 6 of them we are majority shareholder right now. So range between 15.1 and 85%. Typically, the remainder is held by the founders, and in the 7th company we have a 32% stake. But that is why we actually, together with the founders, are able to scale the business. So we do not do the typical venture capital spray and pray approach, but we rather take bets and focus on those.
How big is your team?
Our current team is approximately 20. Wow. So in the holding, and across the group, we are, Michael, is it 160, 180? That, I think that is the amount sort of in the entire econnext group.
Close to 200. And the interesting point, Marco, is the interconnection between the teams, right? So since we own the majorities, and there's no other minority stakeholders, let's say in a venture capital typical situation where there's maybe 5, 6, 7 parties that own 10% plus. In this case, you can really take a more patient approach or a faster one. Right? So you can do both. You can go to a quick scale up, or you could say, let's take this a bit slower. We may have to finish this client project first to then increase the value a bit on a delayed schedule. And overall, that beauty and that luxury, that's really what sets econnext apart. We don't have to wait or don't have to speed up at the expense of the substance. Since we own these up to 85% majorities, we can make these entrepreneurial decisions with a long-term view.
Okay. And what is the value add you give to your portfolio? Because you're with 20 people focusing on 7 companies, you have some good operational leverage here, right? Well, fundraising, I guess, is one thing where you support. So it's like a capital allocation portfolio approach, I guess. Are you helping them with like sales?
Yeah. So I'd say, Marco, it's the classic half and half. You have these central functions, overhead functions that make sense to a pool: tax, legal, accounting, HR systems. So all the subsidiaries are using the same accountant. It makes sense. It follows the same accounting standards. It makes sense from a reporting perspective. It's just comprehensive to a third party to look at because you apply the same rules. The other half of the team, I would say, are the passionate, crazy people that are creating synergies that are beyond the belief of a single unit, but it's probable once you combine 2 or 3. So one example could be a recent MOU that we signed. An ag player comes and wants to decarbonize, but it takes 3 or 4 technologies, including on one end a nature-based solution like biochar, and on the other hand, a new drying mechanism based on photovoltaics rather than on burning wood. Right? So you bring in new technologies, your sister company comes and brings the biochar technology. So once you can offer all these 3 or 4, you become very attractive to a client, but each single unit could not have pitched that solution because they only own 1 or 2. Right?
That's very much the logic behind the Nature Data Alliance, which we are at NOAA incubated, which is like for government to buy one piece of data measuring nature, isolated. Like, okay, you have Aurora, which is a wildfire data specialist, but would you just buy wildfire, or would you also like to know carbon sequestration or biodiversity data? So interesting. So you have to become quite experts in the industries of your investments, right? So is there a player out there where you would say, you know, we like to be like them? Is there, like, for an investor, another example of a sustainability fund? And you explained to me how you run it, like a holding. Is there someone anywhere, maybe in America also?
I mean, since the Siemens family is on the website, it may make sense to compare to an industrial holding approach where you do have all the options and you do want to focus on even narrower, in this case, sustainability topics. So our mission is locked into the articles, Marco. So the Articles Association say clearly it needs to be environment or socially linked. Anything we do, everything else is off topic. We cannot do it. So now if you look at these traditionally very successful industrial holdings, it becomes clear that what we mentioned earlier, you can decide to do a strategic exit, a partial exit, an IPO. You can sell, in our example, in the Siemens case, you can sell Osram, or you could keep Healthineers partially. If you can make these smart patient decisions, you probably end up with the best solution for your subsidiaries. And that's a classic industrial holding approach, right? In the sustainability sphere, we feel there's lots of funds, and often they may have advantages in fundraising. It's just a familiar legal entity. In our case, that may be a bit of our struggles in the past. People have a tough time reimagining a sustainable GE or a sustainable, fully focused industrial holding of any sort. In the family arenas, we have maybe seen 1 or so in the past, but there's not that many impact holdings, if you want to call them that way, that have.
It's interesting, huh? It's interesting because you would argue that exactly what you said, there are significant portfolio synergies. And if you got, I think you raised 100 million from these prestigious German families who see the portfolio approach. I mean, it seems to be the way to go. I think the market is just too young, right? That people haven't. I mean, I know it from the nature data side. You need to connect a lot of different solutions. And by the way, some of them are not expensive to replicate. I think you still need the expert.
I agree.
Interesting. And the continent you seem to operate a lot on is also Africa, is that right?
Yeah, so similar to growing the investor base into what you said, more institutional basis, we have grown the families to Scandinavia, Benelux. So there's a bit of growth in the investor base. And on the activity side, Marco, we have initially set up GRIPS. That's one of our, let's say, utilities for Africa, where you come from a portfolio approach. And GRIPS won the Financing for Resilience Prize, not because they invented photovoltaics, but they invented what's now called the commercial industrial arena, where you serve electricity, clean energy, heating, cooling, often agricultural linked, like you mentioned with coffee, where you come as a project developer and you build many of those, and the portfolio becomes diversified, it becomes de-risked. Now you have an ownership about, let's say, 15, 20, 30 hybrid power plants, some with battery storage, some may be biochar linked, some may be entirely heating, power to heat solutions with our Luminion subsidiary. And that's a huge advantage in Africa. But if you ask me, the decentralization of energy systems are not stopping in Africa, with a huge chance to leapfrog. It looks like we are rebuilding those systems in the rest of the world, in OECD countries as well.
Do you get B2B energy, electricity out of the installation so you can enable local businesses with it?
That's exactly the business model for GRIPS. Right, so GRIPS started with the leaders in soups and chutneys in Zambia, and now they've been linking in Senegal, a big agricultural player, to renewables, the border of Mauritania. So that's exactly this kind of commercial industrial direct linking of decentralized energy solutions, where two SMEs come together.
And this company you own, how much? Is that public information?
Yes, so it's another 84% to be precise. And again, like Job said, the founder is the other party, and the CEO also owns shares. So it's often just 2 or 3 parties deciding what to do next. In GRIPS is one of those examples.
I just spoke to the Catholic Church, who's doing a pilot in Ghana for 100,000 hectares, and they have biochar there also, and agroforestry, and it's interesting. There's African Tech. Have you heard of them? They have a container and battery system. They also presented at the conference.
Yes.
Because these are big topics. Huh? How many employees does a GRIPS?
They also have local employees. They have 4 hubs in Africa, from Uganda to Senegal and from Ghana to Zambia. So overall, there are also 20 people. And then they work together with local EPC. We are all about local content and local value creation. So you would find a Zambian EPC working with GRIPS in Zambia and Malawi, for example, and then the GRIPS team in Zambia, in Senegal, and in Berlin. Right? Senegal has a few engineers already, and Berlin is steering the initial system sizing. So they're coming together quite nicely, and you have to be local. You cannot do.
So what is your portfolio star?
I refuse to answer that, Marco. They're all stars. They're all at different stages.
Because you invest in people and things like this, and then since it's an existing portfolio, I think investors would do very much as a next step due diligence on the portfolio, right? And maybe since we should cover like one exciting one.
But Marco, the truth is, many investors, many tastes, many appetites. So also in our current sort of universe, people fell in love, with one or two, and others with others. So indeed, it's really, we cannot answer that properly, and those companies, of course, go through different cycles. If sometimes you see an opportunity opening up that you have not seen 2 years ago. So it's really something where portfolio theory plays a role. And maybe circling back to your question that you asked earlier, right now we fear that there are private equity type funds that raised a lot of money for ClimateTech, but they realized that in order to go really big in these companies, you need to go early, because there are not that many pure plays already in a mature, profitable situation. So actually securing those situations that are now in a scale-up situation makes a lot of sense for those. And that is actually what we offer. And that is why we are actually keen to partner with those funds also as investors into econnext that use us and our activities as a jumping board. Yeah.
Have you seen follow-on rounds in your portfolio already that you bring in also outside capital, or follow-on rounds will be done by econnext?
Usually we did them in the past, and now is the growth passed away for let's say industrial strategic players that take a look, and that's what you were looking at, Marco, and what Jobst explained, right? Then there's cherry picking. People have their specific targets, what they want to invest in, let's say carbon removal, and then they would call the biochar company. So the initial growth and the de-risking of the portfolio with technologies then gives way to additional players coming in saying, now I like it, now this is, in private equity terms, this is growth capital, I would love to supply that and then be part of one company, let's say number 3. And in traditional private equity also, you could say, I avoid a blind pool. I'm looking at 4, 5, 6 solutions at the same time. I do like biochar almost as much or even better than power to heat storage. Yeah, it's happening as we speak.
Well, let's bundle the segment. So circular carbon, biochar, that's a big one for your portfolio already now. And they operate in what countries? In any country, or?
They could. The initial pilot with a few thousand biochar tons output per year is in Hamburg. Because
my hometown.
Right, so Hamburg, Germany, not that we would be proud of, but traditionally the chocolate industry took stuff to Europe, as we all know. In the future, we would all hope it stays in West Africa and in Latin America. It's 60-70% cocoa is where you said Ghana and Cameroon, Ivory Coast. So the next
Kofi does, I think, one project biochar like this in Ghana where the shells are being left in Ghana.
Exactly, right? So you dry, you ferment, and then you have cocoa shells just before you start making cocoa butter and other products. And that's the moment you take these wonderfully homogeneous biomass flows and you make them into biochar. Currently, that's in Hamburg, but you're right, Marco. And I like the Nature Data Alliance link, because eventually you have to measure certain parts of it. Soil carbon, for example, is it really ending up in soil? You need science-based approaches there. And in the very beginning, you need to know what biomass flows you could use. So you need to do research and scientific established methodology in the beginning and in the end. And that biochar is one of the perfect examples for that. You cannot live without it.
And how does ESG screen fit in all that? I mean, it looks like you have a bit on circular, battery, obviously biochar, solar, and then there are Ambibo and ESG screen. They seem to be 2 additional sectors. Does it make sense for you to have such a big portfolio of different activities? I mean, I like your argument how the portfolio is working together and there's a strategy.
Maybe
does it fit in?
2 words on that. So overall, the subsidiaries from biochar to transportation, bidirectional charging, Ambibox you mentioned, they're covering 80% of human caused emissions, right? From agriculture to transport, industry. So that's the
that's the
right?
logic.
So if you link the transport sector with roof tiles, solar roof tiles, not only are they in a supply relationship and have been, but us owning a piece of both businesses, you can now decarbonize households.
Okay.
That's 40% carbon footprint, right? And on screen 17, very interesting, and I do like that concept with Nature Data Alliance, because literally on Friday I had my bi-weekly update with the management team, and I said, guys, you don't know how much en vogue your talents of data science are in the climate world, in the nature-based solution world, because it's all about measurement, reporting, verification. And of course, they know MRV from all kinds of other, they are measuring stocks and bonds against SDGs. And for their brains, is extremely agnostic in a very positive sense. They could together, Marco, with you, and the outcome from a drone flight in Ghana could measure soil carbon tomorrow. They're so into the field of measuring impact. You give them the task, and screen 17 is called 17 for the SDGs. They can measure agriculture in SDG 2, and tomorrow freshwater ecosystems in SDG 15. For screen 17, they are more the common denominator for measurement, reporting, verification for the group.
Interesting. How many employees they have?
There are 10 people approximately. So a bit of sales, but mostly data scientists. So there's 5 data scientists that their brains and their ideals are running the methodologies.
And where are they based?
Here in Frankfurt. They sit next to Jobst and I.
Interesting. Okay, I understand how you pick your portfolio. And have you marked your portfolio up? Investors, they usually say, yeah, we are at 1.8 times, or is it, or do you don't do like reporting as such? Like, what type of reporting you do? Like, let's say I'm an investor and I want to come in and invest. Like, how different is it to a normal VC, and what type of reporting is there?
So we do the typical monthly reporting across the group. We measure it against the OKRs, and we also give our shareholders...
You measure them against the what?
OKRs, objectives and key results that have been agreed with the management board for the year. You check like this, are you on track or are you not? And that on a monthly basis. And we also give our shareholders the opportunity to catch up with us every second Friday a month for 2.5 hours in order to get actually sort of the insights, what is going on.
How many shareholders do you have now?
We have more than 35 actually right now. So across Europe mostly. First, US family joined econnext, and we also have the first institutional investors, namely insurance companies from Benelux, in our.
And I guess at the NOAA conference, you also met with some private equity funds. The concept is quite homogeneous to private equity because you invest into holding, right? And it's a portfolio of activities. I guess that's the pitch, right? So since the majority, and let's go back to the companies. Did you ever had a failure with a company and you shut it down?
No, so far not. No company failed. We exited one participation successfully. We were the first investor in Go Student back then, and but we were only sort of in minority investor. It became more or less a financial investment for us, which would not, actually apply really to our sort of rationale on the one hand side, and also not to our topic. So when Felix was approached, Felix Oswald and Gregor Müller were approached by Anglo-Saxon venture capital funds, we took the opportunity to take sort of money off the table. And it was actually a nice multiple, north than 4 times, I think.
Congratulations.
So that was one thing where we stepped out. We didn't shut down any activity. But of course, one has to be honest. You never know. Competition might come in. There could be sort of other situations.
What's the average holding time per portfolio? Like what, 2 years, 3 years, or?
look, that is the beauty of our concept. We can apply a best owner principle. Yeah? If we are the best owner, we keep it. If we believe that others are the better owners, we should talk, or maybe we are sort of together the best owners. And that was, what Michael touched on. If there is sort of strategic players that want to focus on PV recycling, yeah? So we should talk. On the other hand, we also have a sort of best timing approach, yeah? Because we are not a fund. We are not forced to sell after 2, 5, or 7 years. Always, a bad timing for the company. But we can really sort of be patient in our structure. And so we don't really have a typical holding period. And so far, I mean, we have founded econnext in 2016 and added over time. So we didn't start with 6 companies. So the Screen 17 indeed is the oldest one, almost 6 years now with us, and has been actually founded by us and incubated. But others are just sort of 2-3 years in our group.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So what type of investors you're looking for? You already said maybe even more family offices, institutional investors, corporates, maybe even sustainability funds themselves, since it's a majority situation. And then what is the investment case? Like, I guess they all prepared like little business plans, and I think you want to raise 150 million. How much the budgets add up to? Like, is there like a safety net for sure? And what is the growth? And do you even disclose that since you are a holding? But it's obviously quite compelling when you know if there's a business plan behind and what's the conviction to this plan.
Yeah, I think, Marco, that's a very good point, because we have left this kind of unique part where technology is being proven, business models are proven. Now they have these fantastic clients, and often there's a very publicly known clients. So now you come into this, what's the story? And you say, hey, this is a holding, so it's not a blind pool. Big plus for traditional private equity due diligence. Then, like you said, you look into 6, 7 business plans, and okay, they add up to a consolidated number that may be your 150 million. So now there's a pool of hopefully patient or permanent capital. Could be endowments, could be pension, more long-term capital that wants to engage in sustainable or future-proof, resilient infrastructure, decarbonization, could be any motivation like that. And now then you're the perfect match if you're econnext, because you have built a portfolio, it's already diversified, covers, like we said, 80% of carbon-emitting sectors. And then you get engaged relatively late, but you have a maturing portfolio already. So you basically get a gift of a diversified portfolio you can look at. You don't have to do the diligence on Jobst or Michael. You do the diligence on Eating on the biochar one. You talk to Kofi, in your case, what has been his experience in biochar. You talk to the guys in Hamburg. You look whether it adds up or whether one party tells you a crazy story that doesn't add up. And then it's a luxurious situation. You may be able to write a bigger ticket. You may then come in with 50 or 100 million and say, I do love the diversified existing portfolio, no blind pool. And then you pick maybe, like you said, one of the winners or 2 winners that you personally like as a manager for this pension portfolio or fund. But then you get the other 3 or 4 as well, because you looked at them, you saw them, you see the topic, and that's how you cruise into the future. And that's growth capital. I'd say it's growth capital, 50, 100, 150 million. And last point I'll make, that table that you looked at consolidated needs, of course, it's now a split of corporate capital to grow and pay for the growth of engineering teams, everything else. There is working capital because you have clients starting to buy projects from you. You need to prepare, pay for the supply chain, do an inventory kind of stocking. And then in the end, it's also CapEx. So you may have project finance transactions on your balance sheet first before you can link them up, maybe with your own shareholders, into infrastructure, yield codes, separate funds. But the initial one, you may have to do yourself. So the capital need of 150 sounds so shocking. But if you add it up by 7 companies in working capital, CapEx, and corporate equity, then it's very digestible and a very good way of using of your funds.
How many years you can use the 154 in your plans?
The current thinking is that in 48 months, all of them will have so matured that they may no longer be in our world, because we may no longer be the best owner. Half of that time, 24 months, they may need to grow and kind of escape the current growth phase into profitability. And that's our thinking. So currently we're planning this to 24 months looking forward. And in that period, they all have a chance to grow profitable or turn profitable. I think that's good, and it's a forecast we can all handle. It's not
they have a chance, or they plan it.
That's the plan, and they all have the chance.
All to be profitable in 48 months.
Yeah, 24 even. The current plan is below 24 months profitability.
Okay. And then in like year 5, you have like 30 million EBITDA.
I think it's even more than that if all goes to plan. And goes back to your earlier question. Some are more mature. Like if you look at the solar roof tiles, I think they tripled last year to the year before. It's 4 times to the last record the year before that. So Marco, if you look at building integration, prop tech, photovoltaics, of course that grows like crazy currently. And for us, it's more handling the supply chain and making sure all the materials are there on time. Autark is a fantastic story. It's probably one of the more mature ones that we own now.
Can you disclose their revenues roughly? Got an idea? It's like 10 million plus, or?
Yeah, exactly. Double digits. This year they will break that hurdle. They have built 600 plus homes all across Europe. And it's one of those.
I mean, for the people who want to invest in sustainability, and they like to have something concrete and don't just set up another new fund. I guess it's more fun to look at the portfolio, and as you said, the one or the other area is exciting for each investor, right?
Yeah.
What are the minimum tickets you need from an investor to come in?
What do you say? 5 million, probably the current.
Makes sense against the background and the backdrop of the 150 ambition. I think this is also, I mean, preferably, there is the one or the other that says, well, 25 or 50 is the right check, because this is an opportunity where I want to bet on. It's not just spreading sort of money across sort of different specific activities. We believe that could make a lot of sense. And in the end, I mean, ClimateTech is a megatrend. If you want to play that, you should go big. And you could actually argue that also with our investment, you are diversified. Of course, you invest directly into shares of econnext, but you have a diversified risk position due to the portfolio.
Yeah. Very interesting. And the companies have to have a DACH, like a German-speaking link, and can operate internationally, or you invest in what? Well, I guess now the focus is on portfolio, but I guess even the portfolio would do some follow-on deals, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. Like adjacent. Or...
Yeah, they grow regionally. We built the first econnext hub in Spain. Comes back to the synergy question, Marco, that you had earlier, because of course the industrial players, the coastal Spain. There's lots of cooling, heating for plastics processing. So there's lots of industrial energy needs that we could fill and decarbonize. Now we have econnext Spain for that purpose. And there will be other hubs built where the parent sets up for 2, 3, 4 of its subsidiaries. And now they're growing the business. There's some sales going on. Oh, let's bring company number 4. They now deserve, quote unquote, their own hub in southern Spain, for example, right? So that's another synergy. And then the other one, I'm smiling.
One question, a hub means you're pushing your portfolio companies' activities in that region, right? It's right. Like a syndicated business development, like right. Helping them. Okay, nice.
Yeah, exactly. And then
very interesting model. I hope that will get you a lot of investors for your round. They just write you on LinkedIn, or where we can provide the email in the text.
Either works. You'll get us whichever channel you prefer.
Thank you. Thank you very much and best of luck.